Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. Took a week off. We are back, or at least I'm back. Aaron is back out on the road. He's at somewhere in California or Denver or Las Vegas or someplace out west, so he couldn't make it tonight. But as always, coming to you from the massive studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Two things that we do a really, really poor job on the show. Number one, we don't have enough women on the show, and there are tons and tons of smart women that we should have on the show. So we need to fix that. We're going to fix that tonight, or at least in a small way. And then the other thing we don't do very well is we don't talk about SaaS applications very often. And quite honestly, I've spent the last few weeks dealing with infrastructure people of all sorts and listening to them bicker about Kubernetes and Mesos and OpenStack and all these other things that at the end of the day are plumbing. And so tonight we're going to fix the not talking about SaaS stuff enough, and we're going to talk to people that actually deal with applications. So excited to have back on the show after a very long stint, an old friend of the show, Gina Minks. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much.
Hey. So first off, thanks for being on. I was in your adopted hometown a couple of weeks ago for OpenStack Summit. First time for me. Really loved it. Nice people, great food, a little steamy, but that's expected. Tell us a little bit about Austin for those folks that don't get down there very often.
Austin's an interesting place. So it's the blue dot in Texas. It's also the capital. I love it. I came here when I came to work for Dell and now work for what was formerly a startup that's now part of EMC. And so I work downtown. There's tons of music just everywhere you look. The food is amazing, and you can get any type of food you want. Probably the best thing that was ever invented in life is breakfast tacos. So if you come to Austin, that's one thing you have to have.
Yep.
Besides barbecue. All sorts of breweries. There's lots of water. There's lots of outside things to do. Everybody that has a dog. It's just cool and laid back. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. It was of all the places I think I would move from North Carolina, Austin would be very near the top of my list. So fun place. You sort of half introduced yourself. So let me kind of partially introduce you, and then tell me, fill in the blank. So you are a product marketing manager for Spanning Backup, which is like you said, a company that EMC acquired, but you guys focus on SaaS applications, which is, completely outside of the normal EMC realm. So tell me what you guys are doing these days, what you're doing and what you guys are doing, and kind of get us up to speed.
Okay, cool. We are a cloud-to-cloud backup SaaS application. We have 3 different SaaS apps that we protect. Google Apps is what we started with about 7 years ago. And then we moved on to Salesforce. And about a year ago, we launched support for Office 365, and that's my product. I'm the product marketing manager for that. For Office 365 right now, we cover mail, calendars, and we just launched OneDrive for Business. So I'm kind of winding down from the OneDrive for Business launch, while at the same time getting wound back up because I'll go to a World Partner Conference in Toronto in July. So learning lots and lots and lots about Microsoft, the application side of it, versus how you store and back up Microsoft applications on premises. And also learning about SaaS, which is just the whole model, how, it's a different buying model, it's a different provider model, it's a different support model, it's a different, even from a product marketing perspective, we do continual release. So Dev has this long list of stuff that they're working on, and they get it done and they turn it on. It's available to everybody. So trying to figure out, if we've got continual release for 3 products, how do we fit into a huge corporation, which is EMC, and their marketing procedures? How do we keep all of our content up to date? How do we keep everybody trained? So it's really interesting just from a product marketing perspective.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And the reason I wanted to reach out to you, we didn't get a chance to bump into each other last week in Vegas, but SaaS is as a market is probably $75 to $80 billion a year. You compare that to AWS, which is doing 10 or 11 billion. So it's 5, 6, 7 times as big as sort of the IaaS market, which people talk about a lot. It's growing at 20% a year. And the one trick for us is, as much as we try to talk to the Salesforces and Microsofts and so forth, they don't give out a whole lot of details. And so what we find is, as we talk to companies like Spanning and like a lot of other kind of interesting SaaS companies, we get some pretty good insight into what's going on with that world. So give us, you come from the background that a lot of us do. Like you've worked for vendors and you've worked on some of the operations side for, stuff that was sold on premises. Like, I don't know, give us the indoctrination, the sort of SaaS 101 and what's different and just how do people buy and who's the buyers and all that basic stuff.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I guess the way I describe it to start off with is just knowing there's three primary, widely accepted cloud deployment models, right? So you have IaaS, you have PaaS, and then you have SaaS. And I always describe what that means, especially to like an IT organization. You have to compare it all to what you did on premises. On premises, you were responsible for the entire stack, all of the hardware, all of the networking, all of the virtualization, all of the operating system, all of the application. You get to pick which version of the application it is. You get to pick how you tweak it, all the rest of it, how you actually run it on the hardware. Then you're also responsible for administering that app, the data, of course, because the data is what's the most important thing, and the users, administering the users. So when you make a decision to go to cloud, and that's kind of what I'm a little fuzzy on with the buying cycle, is how that decision is made. It's very interesting. Every time we talk to a customer, it's different. You make a decision to go. How do you decide to go? Do you take all your Microsoft applications and put them on their SaaS version of it, or do you go ahead and run it in either IaaS or PaaS? Either way, you're making some kind of a decision. With IaaS and PaaS, you can control more of the application. Sometimes you can control the virtualization and sometimes the OS, but that's it. You're not going to have to deal with the hardware. That's kind of the promise of cloud. I don't have to deal with that anymore. Someone else, I'm going to trust my cloud provider to do an excellent job at keeping all of that up and running so I can just run my applications. With SaaS, you kind of give up almost all control over the stack. You don't get to decide what version of the application it is. Your administration rights are going to be condensed. It'll be whatever your SaaS provider decides you can have. You pretty much can't do anything, and you don't want to. That's why you're allowing Microsoft to deliver their applications to you and as a software, as a service model. But you're still responsible for your users and taking care of them, and most importantly, the data.
Yeah, which is your space. Which
is what we do, is taking care of that data. So I know that we've seen from a buyer perspective, and we were just training some new TDRs this afternoon. It's different every single time we have a sale. And I think a lot of that is because, this is just my guess, is companies now are feeling more confident about, or maybe they're feeling like they have to move something to the cloud, so they're going to bite the bullet and they're going to go. So that adoption, where the adoption is we're getting over that curve. We're getting to, people aren't afraid of it anymore, and they're wanting to try it out and adopt it. So when we're in a sale, it can be anyone. It can be, sometimes the backup admins bring us in. This is with 365. Sometimes we see the EUC team because they are the ones that led going to Office 365. Sometimes it'll be the business side bringing us in. Sometimes it's the IT organization, the IT, like the C-level. Sometimes it's the architects bringing us in. But there's, on every level, I think backup gets forgotten about, just like it always did on-prem.
Right. Well, that was what was sort of interesting to me was, because I remember when Spanning had got acquired a couple of years ago, and I thought, we use a bunch of SaaS applications like for the podcast, and most of them are consumer grade, but still, like, we don't really ever think about sort of backing them up. So like it never dawns on me to go, oh, I have a ton of stuff in Dropbox. Like, right. In my mind, I think I go, oh, well, they must back it up or replicate it somehow. But more and more what sort of comes to mind now is, and maybe it's not as relevant with like Salesforce or Microsoft, because there's a pretty good chance they're not going out of business anytime soon. But, you see, so many SaaS applications, and, like, I don't know, Microsoft bought somebody today who does Outlook integrations, and it's like, oh, we're going away. And like, I think that that type of stuff scares people a little bit, and sort of reminds you that, oh yeah, that they run stuff for you, but you do have to keep track of something. Like, so like, do you see that sort of mindset quite a bit? People just sort of forget about it, or what's the driving behavior typically?
To come to us, we've had several people that come to us because they've lost data. So, I mean, this is the thing with data and data protection inside a SaaS is the SaaS providers, they do some data protection. And the why they do it is so that they can meet their SLAs. Their SLAs are always around uptime, right? So Microsoft is 3 nines. So their SLAs, you will never have a downed Exchange server. They're not going to let a bunch of disks failing interrupt service to you. They're going to take care of it.
Right.
But the main cause of data loss has always been, one of the top causes, always been user error. So if Microsoft gets a command from an authenticated, authorized user to delete some data, they're going to do that because we trust them to do that. They want to, that's what they do. If I say delete this whole folder, they'll be like, yes, we will delete this whole folder. If I'm an admin that says, I want to set the retention policies on my entire organization to be 2 years, Microsoft will say, cool, we'll do that. Even if my admin didn't really understand that means everything right away will be deleted with no backups.
Yeah.
So Microsoft and all the SaaS organizations are going to do what we tell them to do with our data. I think Salesforce is a really interesting example. And it's an interesting example where people don't realize how much data is there. But if your enterprise and your sales engine depends on Salesforce, what happens if somebody goes rogue and starts deleting things before they quit? What happens, not even that bad, what happens if somebody new comes in and all of the objects and things in Salesforce, they start moving around because they're building a better, they've been assigned to build a better reporting structure, but they kill a bunch of reports that everybody else needed. How long does that take to restore to the way it was before? And does that matter? Are you okay with your Salesforce not working, or not those reports not working, or people not being able to get in and do their job until those reports and the architecture of that is built back up? And that's been around. Salesforce is like the granddaddy of SaaS. It's been around. They found it
15, 16 years now, or some more than that.
99.
Yeah.
Really long time. So
fill me in on this, because I, as you're explaining this, it's sort of setting off some light bulbs in my head. So, like in a typical corporate environment, if I were to, blow away a bunch of email folders, IT tends to have these sort of sophisticated tools that, they'll kind of shame you and go, well, you shouldn't have done that. But they have ways, within reasonable amounts of time to sort of, get them back because they made a backup. Let's suppose somebody is using the spanning tool for Office 365 and you're doing backups. So let's say you do it one night, you're typing and you fat finger something and you delete something or whatever. Like, how does the whole backup process work? Like, do you go to some admin and then say, go take this file and give it to Microsoft? Or how does that interaction all work?
Okay, so the backup part itself, for all of our applications, we have basically built our own data centers in a cloud.
Okay.
And we use all sorts of workers, and our dev team is pretty amazing. They've done this stuff that everyone's talking about, figuring out how to do with OpenStack and everything. They've done it for a really long time. So we have microservices. We have individual little servers that just go do backups, go do restores, go do exports, whatever it is they're doing, and super scalable and just really work well. So we mix those workers with the APIs of each one of the products that we protect. And we have really good relationships with all the development teams. We have a super good relationship with Microsoft. We just got that. We waited for the OneDrive APIs. That we didn't get those till the end of January. And our devs were like, well, if these APIs could do this, that, and the other thing, we could do our job a lot better. And the OneDrive team was like, cool, we'll make the change. So we've actually helped improve the OneDrive APIs for everybody else, which is kind of cool because our devs are so good at APIs. We take those APIs. We do a daily backup using the APIs. We back it up. And then once it's time to restore, we use the same APIs and we put them right back into the application. Now, how it works from like a user perspective, our app was built specifically for users from the beginning. The Google app was, the Salesforce app is in the app itself, so Salesforce admins can use it. And then OneDrive for Business, the same. You look at how our app looks. It looks like the web environments for each one of those applications. It's adjustable to any device, so you can do it from your phone. But users can restore their own data. So if they've made a mistake, they've deleted it and it's bounced off the tenant completely, they can go into spanning. They can do a search for the last good backup of that particular file or folder or entire account if they want to, and they can restore it with spanning, and we restore right back into their account on
okay, cool.
65. So it says cloud to cloud, never comes to ground.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. So yeah, so you guys basically sort of look like the IT group, at least. I mean, like they don't even really know they have an IT group. It's just sort of like built in natively within the interface. So they just sort of think normally, I guess, if you will.
Well, it looks like it is spanning, so it looks like it, but it is a different application.
Yeah.
This is kind of why people go to SaaS apps for productivity. They want everyone to go really fast. They want users to be able to self-serve and do their own thing. So if something happens and there's a mistake, there's a user error, and the data's gone, of course they're going to want. Why bother IT? Why have to put in a ticket and wait for someone to answer it and do it for you if you could just do it yourself with a couple of clicks?
Right. Well, and that's the thing I've always said is more and more people are just used to doing that. I mean, it's that's what they grew up with, and if you're sub 45 years old, like SaaS applications are kind of commonplace. You have no fears of them. You kind of get it. So what's probably the biggest, I mean, aside from, like you said, people just kind of don't know to back stuff up because they think it just sort of happens. What are the other, big mistakes that you find that people make, or, kind of common tips you need to sort of educate people on to get them, to be smarter about just protecting themselves and what to do and do the right things?
I think, first of all, realize that your SaaS provider can't back up the data. It's out of the wheelhouse of what they do, and they wouldn't be able to do other things. But the things that you will typically lose data from are going to be user error. Are malicious actors, definitely. I was at a Microsoft partner meeting a couple of weeks ago and showing them the new OneDrive capabilities. And somebody told us that's what had happened, is this guy was really, really mad and knew he was going to quit. So he in OneDrive for Business, you can share files with everybody else, kind of like Google Drive does. Mm-hmm. And people can delete your files, kind of like Google Drive too, right? So they can delete your files. And if a file gets deleted, it goes into the file owner's recycle bin because it's basically a SharePoint site. So this guy was mad and he knew he was leaving. So he deleted all the files somebody had shared with him. And the recycle bins have a retention time period. The first one is 93 days. The second one is 93 days. After that, if you don't try and go recover the file, it is purged off the system and it's gone forever. So that happened because people didn't realize the file was deleted.
Yeah.
If the files were gone when they went to look for them to do something. So that's, people being malicious. It happened on premises and we could protect it because we had backups. Same thing. The other thing that happens is add-ons. So Salesforce is probably a great example for that. If you have a marketing automation tool that's feeding into Salesforce, it can change things really quickly in ways that you don't want to. So being able to put, your customizations back really quickly becomes important. And in the collaboration tools, sometimes just getting a new phone and syncing it with the different clients can have unintended disastrous results if you click the wrong things, right? So people thinking they know what they do, but they know what they're doing and sometimes don't. That happens, or just having add-ons like to Outlook that can touch your data because you're authorizing those add-ons to do things on your behalf. If it does something you didn't really realize it was going to do, that can be data loss.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
I think the other one would be hackers and malware and ransomware. So at this point, if you got to think about, like, if I got CryptoLocker on my laptop, the way things sync automatically to OneDrive for Business is with a sync client. So if I get about ransomware on my laptop, all the files get encrypted, including the ones in the sync client. That is a change, so that will trigger those files to get synced up to OneDrive for Business. There, if I've shared that file with anybody else, because it's a change, it will be triggered to sync down to their laptops. So if if the only people that have recovered quickly from, and it's not even quickly, the only people that have recovered without paying the ransom of however many Bitcoins it is, are people who have had on premises really good backup and recovery strategies. And this is another one of those things. You have to have a known good place to go back to. And if this locks up all your files, you will not have a known good place to go back to because everything's encrypted.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So you start getting, so I guess the sort of obvious follow-up question is, and maybe I don't know if you can answer this or how I'm looking for sort of more commonplace. So like you sort of said, hey, the SaaS providers aren't designed to do stuff like backups. We see this even on AWS and stuff where you see this whole ecosystem of people that do everything from like billing to security, so like, they do what they do well, it's a core, and then they allow the ecosystem like spanning to do the things that they do well. How well does that sort of ecosystem model work? Where they sort of, is there a way through these partnerships where they pass along customers so that their customers can be protected, or is there tons and tons of marketing that you have to go find these people? Or I'm not looking for you to give away kind of spanning stuff, but I'm just curious again about how the SaaS industry is kind of dealing with that, especially if maybe sometimes you don't have kind of central IT groups anymore. It's just the business figured out what they need to use.
For sure. So I think all three of the providers that we back up have that sort of an ecosystem. Where people do different things. Like we're straight up backup and recovery. Depending on how you look at archive, we could do that too.
Sure.
But that's one thing that we have actually been working on really hard is just, I think even from a Microsoft standpoint, because I know that best. There are tons of just cloud service providers that want to sell Office 365 to their customers. And when they do that, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to go on because, of course, Office 365 was on premises for so long.
Right.
So you have existing content that needs to come up to the cloud. So, and that's not trivial. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen for that to be a smooth transition. So you have lots of organizations that do that. And I think the cloud service providers are great because and we're working hard to get in with that a little bit better. They want to sell the license for Office 365, but they also just want to quickly add on whatever services they need. So they want to sell it all together at one time.
Gotcha.
Which I think is actually really great for customers because that's one of the things we've found that's been hard is if someone took their company to Office 365, but they didn't think about backups because that might not have been anything they ever thought about. So Exchange admin is probably the last thing they're going to think about, or EUC even, is going to be backups. So it's really hard to be on a call with someone and tell them, look, you screwed up, you should have backups, you got to go find the budget for it now or you're all in very perilous danger. So it's always nice to have that up front, have that discussion. I think the cloud service providers are doing a great job with that.
And then you guys work through sort of the marketplaces and stuff like that for some of the SaaS applications?
All three. So we're kind of new to Office 365 and working through, I think we finally found the team that we need to work with to do a better job. But we are on Pinpoint, which is theirs. We're one of the top apps. We got really, really good ranking in both Salesforce and Google.
Cool.
Of what we do. So I think those things are kind of, because like you said, there's a lot of times who brings people to these applications won't be the IT team. And although I think the IT team is starting to wake up, I talked to more backup admins last week than I have in a long time. And they were not the normal, we don't want to talk, this is dumb, we'll never have to support it. They really wanted to know what was going on. So it was good to see that.
Yeah. Cool. Very, very cool. This has been helpful. So I'll sort of ask a last question. Beyond the normal sort of pitch that you make to people about, hey, you got to do this. Like, I don't know, you're a couple of years into dealing this. Like, what's the biggest lessons that you've sort of learned in general around SaaS? From a product management perspective, from a industry trend perspective. I mean, do you feel like you said, people are getting comfortable with this? Where do you see it going? Do you just see it people getting more and more comfortable saying like any application can be SaaS, or are there any big, red flags that you still see out there?
That's a big question.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I definitely have seen a change probably in the last quarter or so. And it kind of is shocking to me, really honestly, the types of customers we're talking to, and types being in size and verticals. I mean, if the government is starting to use this already, it's kind of weird because they're never early adopters, but this is not anymore. And I kind of have done this at VMEX, talked about this is not shadow IT anymore. It's just not. And I think people are starting to wake up to that fact. So, I think
it's just drive productivity. I mean, calling it shadow IT is sort of, throws you off because at the end of the day, it's essentially just people just want to be productive, and that's the way they want to work. Like they like their mobile phone, they like their tablets, and they work better on SaaS in a lot of cases.
Well, if you think about it, if a SaaS provider's main business goal is to keep their app running for you, so they're going to do whatever they have to do to keep that app up to meet the SLAs. Organizations that are consuming the SaaSes, that data is critical. So even if it's the data being created in productivity apps like Word and email and Skype, it's critical that data is maintained.
Yeah.
I think what I'm seeing, which I think is really interesting, is people not thinking about, okay, how do I offboard employees? With Microsoft, once you pull a license, after 30 days, they totally purge that user's data. So have you thought about, if I go to a SaaS application, what happens with my employees' data once I pull the license? How do I move that data around? How do I retain that data? So I think what needs to start happening is people seeing, first of all, looking at which applications can I move to the cloud and which deployment model is the best for me, my organization.
Yeah.
That makes sense to us. Then once you decide that, you have to think about, okay, especially if you move to SaaS where you have virtually no control over the IT part of it, you have to think about, okay, what are my processes now around people? And what are my processes around the data and retention? And what am I responsible for from a compliance point of view? And how do because you're not going to have the same tools with SaaS that you have with any of the other deployment models. You just aren't going to have them. So you're going to have to think ahead about how you can use different tools like backup and recovery tools, third-party backup, to fit those into some of the things that you need to continue in a SaaS application.
Yeah.
I think that's what people aren't thinking about yet.
Yeah, I'll ask one. I was gonna make that the last question, but I have one more now that I'm thinking about this. So, I think about like regular work. If somebody quits, you can take them out of AD. You can get them off the VPN, all that sort of stuff. You can get their laptop back, and maybe they've got a bunch of PowerPoint or Word files or whatever they have on the local machine or in a shared. But what happens after that 30 days? If like you recognize, hey, that person had a bunch of interesting stuff, how do the SaaS applications work in terms of like it's a piece of content, it's an object or something? Is it permanently associated with that person's name, or can you put it into sort of like some big group bucket for sharing, or like I'm trying to think how that works when it's sort of a corporate asset, but the SaaS applications tend to be kind of end user based type of things, right?
Yeah, so like with I think it would depend on where the content lives with Microsoft, and I'm totally speaking off the cuff, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
So end users with most enterprise licenses, all of them will get an email account, all of them will get a OneDrive for Business account, and that content isn't shared. It is that users, and that's it. And that content, it would just depend. You would have to think about it before the 30 days was up. I mean, it's really easy with backup. With like us, you can restore data to a different user. So that makes it super, super easy. You can retain the license. As long as you retain the license, the data is going to be there, but it's kind of expensive to do that. Mm-hmm. And other than that, there's probably things, but I'd have to look them up.
Okay. Well, definitely stuff for people to kind of, as they're migrating to these things, to sort of keep in mind, because again, these are things that you sort of took for granted sometimes that maybe IT did, or you just didn't think about them. So no, that's very, very, very interesting. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap it up because I know you've got things to do, and I want to thank you so much for the time, for being on, and finally us getting you back on the show. But thank you for educating us. And where can everybody find you out and about, or the stuff you're working on?
So spanning.com has all of the spanning stuff. It's actually, you'd have a 30-day free trial, so
Cool.
just check it out yourself. G Minks on Twitter. Where am I going? I don't think I'm going anywhere until World Partner Conference in Toronto for Microsoft.
Okay.
I'll definitely be at Ignite in September, and I'll probably be at VMworld.
Okay. And people might find you out and about in Austin next week if they're having to be down at OSCON or something?
If you're at OSCON, definitely send me a note, because we're 3 blocks away from the convention center. And just so everybody knows, there's no Uber or Lyft right now, so make plans accordingly.
Yeah, I heard about that. That's a bummer. Well, Gina, thank you so much for being on. And folks, Aaron will be on back next week, and we will talk to you then. Have a good weekend.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.